Welcome to the Queens of the DMV, Real Talk and Real Estate. I'm your co-host, Cher Castillo, with my co-hosts, Arial Pegues and Arnita Greene. As always, follow us on Instagram at Queens of DMV and YouTube and Spotify. We drop our episodes every Thursday at 5 p.m. And if you miss one, just log right back in and check us out. Today, we are talking about whether you're ready to buy or lease commercial real estate. 10 things you must know before buying or leasing. So it's funny because, commercial real estate has gone, during the pandemic, you saw a major decline in commercial real estate. And now you're seeing a major incline in commercial real estate again. I know you ladies don't do that much commercial real estate, and it's generally been about 20% of my business, but I've even seen that increase coming, and it's good to see, both on the purchase side and on the list side. So with all these different incentives that we have going on in the area, I know DC has two great programs through DMPED. One is a commercial property acquisition program where you can get up to $750,000 in grant money. So if you ladies are thinking about purchasing commercial real estate in DC, you should definitely check that out. And for our listeners who are thinking about purchasing real estate, and Maryland and Virginia do have programs not quite as good as $750,000 in grant money, but alternative programs as well. DMPED also has a program called Great Streets, which helps with retail businesses, and they give you up to, I believe, $100,000 to revamp the facade of the front of your building, do interior work, and even some help with building your business as a whole. So there are some great programs out there.
Cher, is this new? Did this come about during COVID, or have these programs already been there?
No, many of these programs have been around and underutilized, really. Probably some of it is for lack of, getting the word out there. But, I had actually learned about the commercial acquisition program through one of my commercial clients. And she's like, girl, I got to, go get this $750,000. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And I looked up the program and she's just like, there's all this money, like nobody's using this money. And
No, what's the name of that one? This one that says 750?
It is called the Commercial Property Acquisition Fund. And it will grant you up to $750,000. And that could be towards the down payment, towards the renovation. You could utilize it many different ways.
Just for purchase?
Huh?
Is this just for purchase,
Just
or
for
can
purchase.
you utilize the lease?
Just for purchase.
Okay.
Yeah. And the Great Street retail program is for both. It's for lease and for purchase. So depending on what you're looking to do, whether you're looking to lease or purchase property. But I say all that to say there's some great programs out there. And I know a lot of times when people are thinking about commercial real estate, they think about leasing before they think about buying. But, it's time to change the way that we're thinking about that. I bought my first commercial property when I was 26, and I never thought I would buy a commercial property that young because of the way historically we've all thought about commercial property. It's like you need 20% down. Where are you going to come up with 20% of $1 zillion? You can start small. It's like the first property we purchased, I purchased it with my partners, was $600,000 property on U Street. 20% of that is $120,000 plus closing costs. You're looking at about $150-ish thousand, but divided three ways, that's $50,000 a piece. It doesn't seem as overwhelming. But the way that we thought about that was we were looking at commercial spaces to lease on U Street, and the leases were upwards of $8,000 for maybe 1,500 square feet versus buying a property at $600,000 and having a note of $3,000 a month. It was a major savings. It's just that we're not programmed to think that way, especially people of color and purchasing commercial real estate. And that's why it's really important for us to start looking at things differently. Um, 20% down is the norm, but there are some institutions and some private lenders that will even, allow you to purchase with 10% down. So, once you do digging, you're able to see that there are alternative ways, even to leverage collateral to purchase property. There's so many ways to acquire commercial. So we have to kind of take what we once knew about acquiring commercial real estate and shift the whole methodology and the way of thinking around it.
Right. So Cher, I know we all get this question all the time. Someone wants to buy a commercial building. They want to, and most at lease or buy. What are some things that they already need to have in place before they give us a call?
Sure. So, one of the major things, like people actually don't think about the checklist of things that they need. They're thinking, especially let's just start on the lease side. If you're looking to lease a property, um,
Mhm.
do you have your business plan done? Because it's very different than residential in that they are expecting to see a full business plan. They want to know that you're a legitimate business. You've thought about this. You have a budget and they want to see your financials. They want to see your tax returns, at least 2 to 3 years of it. And not only do they want to see your tax returns, they want to see your profit and loss statements. So if you don't have profit and loss statements, you want to make sure your accountant or bookkeeper starts getting that in order for you if it's something that you're thinking about doing. And then just smaller things like, you would be surprised at how many people contact me like, yeah, I'm ready to, purchase commercial space or I'm ready to lease, but they have no idea what square footage they're looking for. They're like, just send me whatever you find. Like, it doesn't work that way. Like, do you want, ground level retail space? Do you want, office space, warehouse space? How much space do you need? And a lot of times, someone may think that they need a lot more space than they really need. They may only need 1,000 square feet, but they're thinking they need 3,000 square feet. So just even, narrowing it down to square footage is a big deal.
Yeah.
Another thing, people don't think about is the renovation aspect of it.
Mhm.
Doing commercial renovation tends to be a lot more expensive than doing residential renovation. And you know, are you expecting some tenant improvement allowances where the landlord is going to subsidize some of that renovation budget for you, or are you just expecting to walk into something and just throw some paint on the walls? All of these are things that you need to think about as you get prepared for the process because that overall budget may determine just how much you can spend on a monthly basis versus how much you have to put towards renovating.
Mm, awesome.
Mhm.
Yeah, we get
I
that
would,
all the time.
I would say that that's like the biggest thing, the square footage. So I have two commercial properties. One is inside of a mall front, and then the other one is a ground level storefront. And it's two totally different operations as far as, what the mall front situation is providing versus the shopping center situation. So, and the square footage is different for both stores. So it's definitely something that you have to consider because, if you take on more space than what you need, you do pay per square foot. So
Yeah.
then you realize you could have gotten a smaller space for cheaper and made, the same or be more efficient, if you will.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I think
absolutely.
that matters.
And if you're getting a larger space, but you're thinking about like offsetting costs, perhaps, you may build out a few offices within that space and then rent those spaces out so you don't have to pay the total lease on your own or the total mortgage on your own. And that
Definitely.
can be a creative way to be able
Yeah.
to afford a space as well.
And that would be called like a sublease, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You'd be a subtenant of the main tenant. as long as, the commercial lease allows for that. If it's a property that you're purchasing, then it doesn't really matter. You can do whatever you want, but you do need permission from the landlord to be able to sublet space, at least have that as a clause within the commercial lease agreement.
Mhm.
When buying commercial property, should you have a commercial attorney with you?
Absolutely. It's like a commercial document is so much different than a residential document. And I know we're so used to seeing, reading through 40 plus pages of a sales contract. But these commercial leases will be 300 pages sometimes,
Mm.
and if you don't have the expertise behind it, which, even though you might be a commercial agent, you're not necessarily a commercial attorney, a real estate attorney. So 100% of the time, I always advise my clients, whether it's a lease or commercial sales contract, to have a commercial attorney review everything for them. And, it can be pricey. I mean, it can be as low as $500 for a review, onwards of $5,000 for a review. It depends on, how big of a package it is and how many revisions you're going to do to the lease. But I would say on average, you're probably looking for a review of a lease anywhere between 500 and 1,500.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Did we talk about triple net leases yet?
No,
We didn't.
no, go for it.
We want to know about triple net leases.
Yeah.
I get asked this sometimes, and I'm like, where did you learn that from?
Where did you learn what a triple net lease is, or?
Yeah, because you'll have some commercial, because I don't do commercial as much as you do, so you might be able to explain it better, um, than I can. But I've had people like specifically ask me about it.
Sure. So triple net lease is, in addition to the rent that you're paying, tenants are paying for the property taxes, they're paying for the insurance premium, and they're paying for maintenance. So the triple net constitutes those three things beyond the lease. That's all that it means. So in some cases, you may have a lease that is all encompassing of everything, and
Mhm.
then in some cases, you may have to pay for everything separately. So a triple net means you are paying for the rent and those three additional expenses.
So I've seen some leases that even throw in the utilities,
Yeah,
so it
absolutely.
becomes quadruple. Then
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's
It
why I
really
couldn't really, breaking it down is, different depending on how you look at it. Like some people will throw the utilities in the maintenance part of it. I've seen it in that section, and it's not,
Mhm.
considered maintenance in my eyes, but it depends on what type of building you're in or what type of commercial space you have.
And most landlords are going, and, commercial listing agents are going to have all of that information outlined for you as part of the listing. So you know what it is going in versus spring that on you, when you get to the letter of intent or the lease signing. You'll know exactly what you'll be paying for before that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I take it that you should interview a couple of commercial agents before you pick the right one.
I would think that would be a good idea. I mean, it's just like interviewing anyone. You want to make sure they know what they're doing. And, even when I bought my first commercial property, we were the agents and we were all agents together, partners, but we had no idea what we were doing. And it was probably a bad idea to represent ourselves. I'll put it that way, because we barely knew what triple net
Best way to learn.
was.
I was just about to say, but you learned it that way, right?
I did learn it that way, but in hindsight, we should have hired a commercial agent to explain everything to us so we knew exactly how, the entire process worked, because we were treating it like a residential transaction and it was
Mhm.
very different.
Yeah.
Um, and, I think for many people, if they see that an agent is both a residential and commercial agent, they are going to assume that they have the experience with both. But that's not necessarily the case. I can call myself a commercial agent, yet I've never done any commercial transactions before because, as you both know, you don't have to go through a specific training to be a commercial agent. It is highly suggested that you do,
Correct.
go through like a CCIM certification and learn, all the ins and out of commercial transactions. But some people don't, and they just kind of learn as you go. And some commercial agents have done a great job learning as they've gone, and some really don't know. So asking them very specific questions, what their experiences have been like, do they have commercial lenders? Do they have commercial vendors in place? If they do decide, to work with that specific agent, those are all very important questions because you don't want to find yourself midway through the process with someone who doesn't know what they're doing.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then there's special tools that you need as a commercial agent too. I mean, you just really can't use MLS for
Yeah.
for commercial property. I mean, there is commercial property in the MLS, but I mean,
It could
let's
be confusing though.
I know it is, but you know, there's special tools that need to be used in order to track down commercial space.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Bright MLS or your local MLS for those who don't live in the area. I would say it's a starting place, but
Yeah.
the inventory that you find is very minuscule compared to, the main CoStar multiple listing service, which is all commercial. I mean, if I do a search in Bright MLS versus CoStar, we're talking about hundreds of,
Correct.
differences in inventory. So if your commercial agent is just using Bright MLS, red
No.
flag.
Red flag.
Red flag. And CoStar is not cheap. I mean, we're looking at about $500 a month versus, Bright MLS that's like $170 every 3 months. So they are super invested in their commercial business if they've subscribed to CoStar for sure.
Definitely.
Cher, what's the biggest commercial deal you closed?
So the biggest commercial deal I've closed is a $3 million sale.
That's solid.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah, that
Yes.
was my
So
big.
how long? So and then the other thing too is the
Oh, yeah.
commercial cycle can possibly be longer, especially if the customer doesn't have their documents in order. I've done a couple of commercial deals. I had one commercial deal that took a year to close, and it was just various things that came up throughout the process. So,
Yeah.
you know, commercial deals can be short, they can be long. I've seen you close commercial deals faster than anybody.
It depends on the size of the deal, though.
Yeah.
Like if it's a smaller, we're talking under $1 million and maybe under 5,000 square feet. I think you can move through those transactions very quickly, whether the property is vacant or not vacant. All of those things play a factor. But you did make a really good point, Ariel, because the vetting process up front is really key. Like when my clients come to me and say, "Oh, I'm interested in, leasing or purchasing," I send them to my link tree. I make sure that they fill out the commercial intake form. And if most of those answers are no or I don't know, we have a long way to go.
Right.
No, but then if the client comes to you and they have all their ducks in a row, it's likely somebody who's already been there, done that before.
Mhm.
So they know that they need their business plan, their tax returns, and if they don't, that they're going to need a guarantor or they're going to have to personally guarantee, the lease themselves. So in that case, you can move through really quickly. But the average commercial loan cycle is anywhere between 45 and 60 days on the short end.
Mhm.
And that's in a perfect, perfect world. I closed 2 condos at the beginning of this year, and that was, we did um, we rented, so we did a pre-occupancy settlement agreement so they can get in very quickly. So they leased for about 3 months before they purchased, and it took them about 4 months to close that. So that's pretty common. I mean, especially if, they had a lot of built out work that they needed to do.
So
It
they
wasn't
purchased units, they purchased the whole building?
They purchased 2 condo units within a larger building.
Okay.
Yeah. So, the renovation process itself can sometimes take 6 months to a year. So if you're able to walk into something and you don't have much to do and you have, all your ducks in a row, you can close in as quickly as 45 to 60 days.
Yeah, I've had some clients, you mentioned the intake form, you can go over that with them. And I've just had some clients who I could not take on just based on the type of business that they were looking to you know, bring to a commercial space.
Mhm.
After shopping it around, I know like in this area, and I would say DC is more acceptable of it. I had a client that wanted to open a dispensary in Maryland.
Mhm.
And I'm like, okay, now this was several years ago. This isn't 2021 or 2020 when we're seeing them pop up all over the place. This was in like 18 or 19 when it kind of wasn't,
Yeah.
legal or acceptable. And I had a time, trying to get this client established in Maryland because that's where they wanted to be. They were just super adamant about being in Maryland. And, I tried to, kind of steer them to DC more because of the genre of their business,
Right.
So at that time, I think, DC was allowing it. And then, Maryland was kind of on the fence. And now, I mean, I see the dispensaries popping up everywhere,
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And it depends, are they a legal dispensary or are they a gifting dispensary? Because
right.
even I have quite a few clients that have gifting dispensaries, and it was very challenging for me to find them space.
Yeah.
You probably get like 200 no's before you get
Yeah.
a one consideration. And it's unfortunate because they actually can't afford the space. They can probably afford to pay for an entire year's upfront if they wanted to.
Right.
But it's the old school mentality of a lot of these landlords that are still thinking, this is illegal. I shouldn't have this in this space. Therefore, they're afraid to get themselves into those types of leases. So I totally get it because I have quite a few clients that I'm still looking for additional space for. They may be in a location now, but the challenge is
What
finding
time?
more space for them.
Yeah. So they probably just picked something that was kind of short term to find something a little long term.
In some cases, or, in some cases, they were just willing to pay more a month because, money talks.
Exactly.
So what was supposed to be a $10,000 lease, they had to up the ante to $15,000 a month,
Okay.
just so they could secure that space.
I
So
get
that
it.
is a challenge. And speaking of terms of leases, another thing that people don't think about is, I'll have clients that come and say, well, I only want a 12-month lease. Okay. Well, in commercial, it's a bit different. Not impossible. You could potentially have a 12-month lease, especially if you have an individual landlord that, is calling their own shots, then they may agree to something like that. But the average lease term in commercial is right around 5 years,
Mhm.
3 being on the low
1
end.
year with the option for 10.
Right.
So,
Exactly. So,
yeah,
you have to.
I know the mall situation because we have a lease in the mall. Like they do 1 year leases. It's temporary though. It's basically for a year, and then you can decide if you want to renew. But if you're really trying to like establish your business, and it's going to take probably longer than a year before people realize like, oh, this store opened up, it's months before you're like, oh, this store came into the mall. So
Right.
it really depends on where you are, and what works as far as the lease is concerned. I know like the malls have a brand like Simon or somebody who does leases, and they're into that temporary space. So you have to actually look at your business and figure out what works as far as the terms, because the worst thing is to get into a long, lease and you decide later that you want to make changes to it or just leave altogether.
Yeah,
So,
and malls have been, they've been really struggling.
yeah,
Yeah. So they've had to adjust the way that they do business too, because historically you wouldn't be able to get a 12-month lease at a mall,
I
but
think this is
because
COVID related. They started doing that. You know what I mean?
COVID, and I think like, just like all the online sales, like, like a lot of brick and mortars have had to closed down because there's Shein and Amazon and like all these online retailers that you can get something for $5.99 a whole outfit.
Exactly.
Why drive to the mall and spend $50 for it? So they've definitely had to adjust the way that they've started dealing with leases as well.
Yeah.
And the other interesting thing for, that I've learned in commercial real estate is and I've told you guys this before, it's definitely like a good old boys club,
Mhm.
that women aren't invited to for the most part, and
I've
people of
noticed
color
that.
aren't invited to. Because when you really think about commercial real estate, like you think about, well, you don't really see people marketing themselves as commercial realtors like we market ourselves as residential realtors. And it's
Right.
because we're not invited in.
Right.
So that, like the challenge of being a commercial agent that's a woman and that's of color is, I mean, it's a big challenge. I mean, I've been dealing with one deal on the Navy Yard for the last month, and it's a $3 million property. And I have reached out to the agent at least 20 times. He refused to return my phone call.
Dealing with this.
And the last message I left was, and I hate to do this, but I felt like I had no other choice. I was like, well, you know what? I'm just going to call your broker and see if I can, if I can get through to someone in your office. I immediately got a call back, but it was still very challenging. The communication was off. And I'm like, well, so you don't want my client's $3 million. Why?
I'm trying. You know
What
what?
you have to do, a woman.
I went through the same thing, and I'm just trying to figure out. Like, I feel like it's more acceptable on the commercial side to just ignore calls and emails
Oh,
I
it
think,
absolutely.
versus on the residential side.
yeah.
I'm still waiting for a reply from December.
I called a commercial agent. It was just in Greenbelt over there in those small little office buildings, and it was the agent never called me back, never. And I called him a couple of times, and it's ridiculous.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think our customers, if we are representing commercial property, like or clients, like I think the takeaway is like it's a little bit more. You got to be a little bit more patient, with the responses and with the communications back and forth. I'm not saying to accept delays.
mhm.
However, I feel like it's a slower pace than residential too.
It definitely is a slower pace, but you also have to be creative with your approach. I mean, I personally do not have patience.
I know you don't have problem with that.
At all, you or Ariel.
I'm like, I gave you 24 hours to respond. You did not respond. I am actually showing up to your office and
I'm calling
introducing.
from different numbers.
Yeah, and or I'm having a white man call on my behalf. Like if whatever I need to do to get you on the phone.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I mean, it's just commercial real estate, and I hope that we're seeing a change because I do, a lot of my clients, I would say 95% of my commercial clients are people of color.
Good.
So, it's like when I first started in commercial real estate, that was not the case. So to see the trend of Black and brown people actually not only leasing but buying too, I mean, that's awesome. Because when you look at the overall picture, I was looking up some stats. It's 0.7% of 889 real estate investment
Mhm.
firms are owned by women. So that's not even 1%, you guys.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. That is ridiculous.
Not even 1%. And, there was another stat and this is in DC, that of commercial real estate brokers in our area, 44 of them received an award of excellence, and not one of them were of color.
Mm.
So to me, that means that there's just not a lot of us out there.
Right.
There's not a lot of us out there, and the few that are so in the minority of, the amount of business that's being done, that how could we receive any type of award?
Right.
I think there's an opportunity for growth, and obviously more opportunity for people of color. I mean, I didn't find any stats. Did you?
No, there were no stats. I was looking up ownership of
Right.
commercial properties. I could not find any statistics that spoke about minorities and commercial real estate ownership. How crazy is that?
I think we both started digging for the same thing, and I didn't
Yeah.
find anything either. And I was actually shocked, but not shocked, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. I mean, according to the US Census Bureau, fewer than 6% of real estate professionals are Black. That's overall residential and commercial real estate, which seems weird for us because we live in the DMV, right? So we're like,
Yeah.
what are you talking?
It looks like something needs to shake up. Needs to
Yeah,
shake up.
absolutely. But I mean, across the rest of the world, because we do live in our little cocoon here in the DMV, but across the rest of the world, people aren't really looking like us at all.
Yeah.
And of course, that also shapes who's buying and leasing as well. So, we really need to do a better job of changing that, and, building our own commercial real estate brokerages and owning our own commercial properties, so it diversifies the entire, commercial real estate community.
I agree.
Yeah.
Thanks, Cher. Thank y'all.
Well, I feel like I was a guest on the show today.
I know.
Yeah, pretty
Yes,
much.
yes.
We're gonna use you whenever we can.
Exactly. Why not?
Well, this was awesome, and we can wrap up. But yeah, if anybody ever has any commercial questions, I'm happy to answer those for you. And if you need me to do a search on CoStar, no problem.
That's right.
Well, let's wrap up for today, ladies. I'm Cher Castillo signing off.
I'm Arnita Greene.
Arial Pegues.
And as always, check us out on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts every Thursday at 5 p.m. Till next time, guys.
Bye.